Mine Wars Museum also, they do a super job informing the tourists and everyone else about the sacrifices made by our grandpas and great-grandpas and whatnot, as far as the sacrifices they made back during their coal mining days in the early 1900s in order for the people today could have such a much better life than what they endured. So we're thankful to them for that.
Our history was dying out, it's not getting told like it should be in our school systems and stuff. And Local Union 1440 has always tried to do something every year to promote our history in the school system. Through the combined effort with the West Virginia Mine Wars Museum and their great board of directors, we've really promoted our history. The kids didn't know anything at all about it, and it's just been fabulous for our area.
Coal miners and, across this country, especially here in East Kentucky and Southern West Virginia, he's saved their health care, provides them with a good monthly pension, and we just laid him to death, and we're going to honor him by dedicating this building here to President Cecil Roberts.
We'd like to recognize all of our membership nationwide that's in the United Mine Workers, because there's no greater union than the United Mine Workers. There's no union that's known to sacrifice that the United Mine Workers is known. Like Hawkeye said, we all have health care and pensions today, and it's because of our union.
Hi, I'm Terry Steele. I'm a member of Local 1440. We're standing here at Warm Hall. This is the location of the Stone Mountain Coal Corporation, which in 1920 evicted miners from their camp. This is part of the camp of Stone Mountain here in Warm Hollow. Some people say there was up to 3 different camps, and that's kind of typical of the southern coal fields, because most of the time these camps were segregated. The blacks were put in one part of the camps, immigrants in a part, and then the whites and bosses who worked for the coal companies in another part of the camp. So we know that another part of the Stony Mountain Coal Camp is located at North Matewan. That's up on Mate Creek, probably about a half a mile from where I'm standing here. And that's where the evictions, from everything we know, started on May the 19th, 1920, when the Baldwin Phelps detectives came into town. They arrived in here by most estimates, about 11 o'clock that day, and went to the Urias Motel or Hotel here in Matewan, which was at that time was located in the Buskirk building. And eventually ended up, from what we can say, was back here at Warm Hollow from where we're at now. These coal companies at that time hired these groups of Baldwin Phelps guys who enforced the law, or what they considered enforcing the law. Most of them was thugs who came in, and at that time the union here had just, most of the people who worked for Stony Mountain had just joined the union, and they were living in company houses. If you lived, especially outside the town limits, you lived in the company's houses. They had their own stores, they had their own doctors, they had their own churches, schools. Everything was controlled by the coal company. So when the miners went union, they sent these guys in here to throw them out of their houses. And that's what happened. And we also know that this mine, probably about 500 foot down the road here, is where the portals for the Stony Mountain Coal Companies are located. And we know that by looking at the geological survey maps from the West Virginia University on the mining and mapping. And we can see the Stony Mountain Coal Camp is directly across, if you're coming across the Buskirk Bridge out of Kentucky and the railroad tracks, if you're looking at that mountain, you're looking pretty well at where the Stony Mountain mine was located.
On May 19, 1920, detectives from the Baldwin Phelps Detective Agency arrived to evict coal miners and their families from their coal company-owned homes. After eating the Urias Hotel, the detectives made their way back to the depot to board the train to go back to Bluefield. On their way back, they were met by the chief of police here in town, Sid Hatfield, also known as Smiling Sid or Two Gun Sid. The agents tried to arrest Sid Hatfield. In turn, Sid Hatfield tried to arrest the agents. All this time, no one knew that there were armed miners in the windows, on the doorways, and on the tops of the buildings that lined Main Street. Someone fired a shot. No one's sure who. But when all was said and done and the smoke had cleared, 10 men lay dead here in the street. Today, the town offers visitors many ways to experience the struggle that the miners went through and hear about the different first-hand account of the Matewan Massacre. Our newest storytelling machine, our Eco Post here in town, will tell visitors a first-hand account of the Matewan Massacre, along with many different stories and histories about the other feuds and battles that took place. You can also visit me at the West Virginia Mine Wars Museum here in Matewan.
I wanted to show everyone the City Hall and lockup that was built in 1908. And it's just incredible that the building is still standing. 6 years ago, when I decided that I wanted to try to preserve the building, it took a lot to get people on board. And I have to give thanks to the Hub who came into town, and they believed in me. And they also wanted to see this building, restored. And I can't say enough about all the volunteers that we've had, and it's turned out wonderful. And I'm just so glad that the building didn't crumble and fall, because it's a big part of history. As soon as we're able to open, we're hoping to be able to, get visitors to come in. Everything's going to take time. Of course, it's not complete yet. And there wasn't a lot of history that we could find on the building for some reason. We went through court records, and it just wasn't there. But we know that Sid Hatfield would have been chief of police in the town of Matewan and used the jail as his quarters until his death in 1921. After the deadly gunfight broke out in the streets of Matewan, there was an eerie and tense feeling in the air. Shortly after, many were looking for safety, and residents of the community found it here at the Methodist East South Church. Shortly after the Battle of Matewan, children were taken away from the bloody and street scene and into the basement of the church, where games were played and children were fed until the situation was resolved. There continued to be battles up and down Tug Fork from 1920 to 21.
At the oldest wooden structure in the town of Matewan that is related to the history of the things that happened, the Battle of Matewan in 1920. And this is the place that was a funeral home at that time. And Sid Hatfield and Ed Chambers' body was brought here the day that, they had them laying in wake for people to visit. The Oddfellows Lodge was upstairs, and the old stage and everything is just like it was in 1918 when they had their lodge there. They would come in, have their services, and then all of the different lodges were here to celebrate Sid and Ed because they had been their champion, their hero. They didn't have the same language as other people, and they didn't have much power against others like the coal company. Sid was their connection. He took up for them, and it meant something to them. So when they died, they were here with flowers, with all of their lodge finery, their sashes, their vest, and there are about 4 different unions or lodge groups that's represented with their outfits, marching with the bodies through the town of Matewan. We're here at Matewan at the scene of where Testerman's jewelry store was. This is where Testerman, that was the mayor, and Jesse lived. And of course, after he died, then this land was inherited with Jesse and became Sid and Jesse's place when they got married. In 1921, when they were murdered, all of the visitors came upstairs to spend time in the apartment where Jesse and Sid lived. And there are pictures of lines of people just waiting to get inside there. Here's the tombstone for Ed Chambers and the group that had been in Matewan. All the lodges and all the mourners carried those coffins all the way across from Kentucky to West Virginia, or from West Virginia to Kentucky, across the bridge and up this hill. And the mourners were all around Masterman's grave. This was the one that died a year earlier, or half a year earlier, like in 1920 at the Battle of Matewan. And he was also brought up to this graveyard, and his friend Sid Hatfield is buried right beside him. We're here at Sid Hatfield's grave. He was killed on the steps of the McDowell County courthouse, and we sometimes hear the term Matewan Massacre about what happened in 1920, and we fight that. We think that this was a battle, but here's the real massacre. When Sid and Ed was gunned down because they had no guns on them. There was no shootout, even though newspapers called it a shootout. It was actually an absolute slaughter where they were the guns were right straight to their head, and they were blown apart in front of their wives on the courthouse steps. And in 1921, all the mourners were around. There's photos of his casket being opened for them to see his hero before he's buried. There's pictures of all of them in their costumes, their vests and sashes, all around the casket. And there's Jesse Chesterman Hatfield and Sally Chambers beside each other, sitting at the graveyard of Sid and his casket before he was interred at this place that's very special to the Union miners. You can tell that they come and decorate these grave sites. Their upkeep is very well done.